There's only one thing in D&D that can kill Kratos, and it's not a Tarrasque. In fact, what if I told you the God of War would survive a fight with the Tarrasque, one of the most powerful monsters in all of Dungeons & Dragons? Today we're building Kratos in D&D, and yes, we're definitely keeping the rage, getting absolutely insane amounts of effective hit points, resistance to any god that's going to be dishing out damage, and a strength score is so high it actually competes with the gods. Your DM is not going to be happy with this one. So here's the thing about Kratos. He's kind of already a D&D character. Like, obviously he's insanely strong, he hits things really hard, and he basically refuses to die no matter what you throw at him. But the mechanics that actually make him work and are actually accurate to the God of War games, that comes down to one specific class that I genuinely think is an incredibly underrated build in D&D. And when you pair that with the right race, you end up with something that's, well, let's just say that Tarrasque is going to be having a bad day. We're going to go through this piece by piece. The race that gives Kratos a nice little boost and his divine heritage, the subclass that makes him feel a lot more like Kratos, and a specific feat that I feel like got left out the first time I built him. Not to mention, last time I had to rely pretty heavily on some magic items. We don't need those anymore. And by the end you'll know the exact build that makes Kratos not just playable in D&D, but actually kinda busted. But let's go ahead and start with the foundation of the build, because the class choice here is more interesting than you'd think. And in case you need help following along, I have the character sheets available up on Patreon, linked down below. But let's go ahead and start with the species. Kratos is in fact part god, and there's a great species for that. It's just going with an awesome R. These are celestial beings, and with that comes celestial resistance. So you have resistance to necrotic and radiant damage, which is going to be the majority of the types of damage you deal with when fighting the gods themselves. You got necrotic for dealing with Hades, and you got radiant for dealing with most of the rest. You also get the feature healing hands, so as a magic action you can touch a creature, which is basically just going to be the boy, or you can lay your hands on yourself and heal for a number of d4s equal to your proficiency bonus, but you can only use this feature once per long rest. Then finally, you get Celestial Revelation. We're going to be leaning into this concept a lot for his Spartan Rage that he's able to activate. So when your character reaches level 3, you can transform as a bonus action, giving yourself some bonus damage. So once on each of your turns, while transformed, you can deal extra damage equal to your proficiency bonus, dealing either necrotic or radiant damage, and then you can specialize in a type of transformation. Now, I know in one of the God of War games, he literally tears the wings off enemies, and you can use that to help yourself fly, and you can do that here with the transformation, Heavenly Wings. So 2 spectral wings will sprout out from you temporarily, giving you a flying speed equal to your movement speed. You can also deal with the more undead side of things with Necrotic Shroud, so your eyes briefly become pools of darkness, and you have to force creatures within 10 feet of you to make a charisma saving throw, versus a DC that factors in your own charisma. And Kratos doesn't have a lot of charisma, so I wouldn't rely on this one very much. But if an enemy fails, they have the Frightened condition. The last option for your transformation is Inner Radiance. This is probably what I'd use the most and feel true to character, because it makes it so you have a bright light shining from you in a 10-foot radius, and any creature that ends its turn within 10 feet of you takes radiant damage equal to your proficiency bonus. So that means while you're fighting up close and personal, your enemies take damage just from being too close to you while you're activating your Spartan Rage, and then you get to deal extra damage when you hit them as well. Then when it comes to a background, Kratos tried not to be fighting everybody. He tried to just live a normal life, not killing gods constantly. And when he tried to do that, he was kind of like a farmer, just living out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm going to take the farmer background. This gives you skill proficiencies in animal handling and nature, and it also gives you the tough feat. So you get an extra 2 hit points of health per level of your overall build. Then we get to dive into the class. And we've already mentioned he's got that Spartan Rage. So we're going to lean into that by going with a Barbarian. Now for longtime viewers of my channel, this might feel a little too close to how I built him the first time, but trust me, he's going to go a different route than he did last time. Not to mention, this is updated for the newer version of D&D. When you become a Barbarian, you get the largest starting health pool out of any class in D&D, using a D12 for your hit point die, meaning that your starting health is going to be 12 plus your Constitution modifier. You get weapon proficiencies in simple and martial weapons, and you get proficiency with light and medium armor as well as shields. Now, we're going to actually be using the medium armor because in the newer God of War games, he does have some pretty awesome armor that he's able to get. So I want to make sure I actually utilize that and not have to factor in his dexterity quite as much, because barbarians get a thing called unarmored defense. So if they're not wearing armor, their armor class equals 10 plus their dexterity modifier plus their constitution modifier. But we're going to lean into using actual armor here. Then the last thing you get just from becoming a barbarian in the first place is you get a couple skills, and we're going to grab athletics and intimidation. Then at first level of barbarian, you get rage. We've mentioned rage a lot already. So as a bonus action, you can activate a rage. And the very first thing this gives you is damage resistance. So you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. And mix that with the resistance you already have from radiant and necrotic damage. And that means that when dealing with most gods that aren't purely elemental type gods, you are actually going to be resistant to pretty much all the damage you would be taking. Meaning that your effective health pool is twice as large because you're taking half damage. Then also when you activate your rage, you get rage damage. So when you make an attack using strength with either a weapon or an unarmed strike, you get some extra bonus damage. That damage is a +2 for now, but as you level up throughout Barbarian, it gets all the way to a +4. Then the other good feature of Rage is that you have strength advantage. So you have advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. The only downside of Rage is that you can't cast spells and you can't concentrate on spells. Then the last thing you get at first level of Barbarian is weapon masteries in 2 weapons. So we want to focus in on that Leviathan axe, which has become so iconic, with the battle axe. This gives us the weapon mastery feature Topple. So if you hit a creature with the battle axe, you can force the creature to make a constitution saving throw. And if the creature fails, they're knocked prone. Then I need to focus in on those blades of chaos. And while you could argue that they are daggers, they're kind of big for daggers. They're kind of right in between that and being swords. And when I built him the first time, I had to use a magical axe and I had to use these blades of broken mirrors just to be able to make him at all. But with a few updates here, we're going to be able to get around that, so I can take full advantage of whatever type of weapon would help us the most. And since it's a little bigger than daggers, let's just go with some scimitars, because that gives us the weapon mastery property Nick. So when you make an extra attack with the light property you can make as part of the attack action as a bonus action, you can then instead make it as part of your main attack action. Simplifying the wording of this means just that if you're dual wielding scimitars, usually you'd have to use your bonus action to make your offhand attack, but now you can make it as part of your main attack action, freeing up your bonus action for other stuff. Now, we still don't have 2-weapon fighting as a fighting style because barbarians don't get fighting styles, but that's okay, because even though you're going to be attacking with your offhand, you can still add your rage damage bonus to it. So it's not just a flat dice roll, it still gets to add in at least a little bit of a bonus, boosting up your damage pretty considerably. The only thing we now have to worry about is being able to throw the axe and have it come back, or having that reach with the scimitars like they're attached by chains. But we have a good way to cover that, which I'll get to in just a minute. But first, at second level of Barbarian, we get Danger Sense. So you have advantage on dex saves unless you're incapacitated, and also at second level you get Reckless Attack. So when you make your first attack on a turn, you can decide to attack recklessly, and doing so gives you advantage on attack rolls using strength until the start of your next turn. The only downside is that attack rolls against you also have advantage, but that's okay. You can just resist most of the damage hitting you anyways, so it's not as big of a deal. Then at third level of Barbarian, you get to choose a Barbarian subclass. And last time around, I went with Path of the Zealot, which fits for the whole divine stuff. Path of the Zealot oftentimes are worshipping gods and invoking godly power. And while Kratos, being a god of war, does invoke the godly power, he does not worship any gods. He wants to kill them. So I wanted to go with something else that felt true to character and would give us some new possibilities. I was very tempted to go with the new Path of the World Tree because that can extend our reach, and it'll be like the branches of the tree are like the chains attaching to your wrist for the Blades of Chaos, and it would have been great. But that has a major restriction that whatever weapon you're attacking with has to be heavy or versatile, meaning that attacking with some scimitars isn't going to work. However, I figured out a great alternative. And that's by going with the Path of the Giant. And this comes from Bigby Presents Glory of the Giants. This gives us one additional language, which we're going to go with deep speech just because Kratos' voice puts my deep voice to shame entirely. And it gives us one cantrip, which we're going to choose Thaumaturgy because it just allows your voice to boom out even more, especially if you're yelling at the boy. But the other feature, thanks to choosing the subclass, is Giant's Havoc. So your rage pulls in strength from the primal might of giants, transforming you into a hulking force of destruction. While raging, you get two benefits. First, you get Crushing Throw. So when you make a successful ranged attack with a thrown weapon using strength, you can add your rage damage bonus to the attack's damage roll. Now, technically, you can throw any weapon and make it kind of a thrown weapon, but we're gonna have a way to improve our actual weapons and make them a bit more throwable later. The other feature it gives us is Giant Stature. This is the one thing that's not going to fit the whole Kratos theme as well, because when you're raging, your reach is increased by 5 feet, which is great because that means that's similar to you having the chains on the Blades of Chaos or throwing your axe and having it come back. But it's only 5 feet. The part that doesn't play in is that if you're smaller than large, you become large. Granted, there is a point in the original games where Kratos is able to become this giant god fighting Ares, but that doesn't really play in that often. However, if you happen to be in a position where you're in a room that doesn't allow you to increase your size just doesn't change, but you can still gain the other benefits. Then finally, the last thing you get at 3rd level is Primal Knowledge, so we can get additional skill proficiencies and we're going to boost up our perception. Then at 4th level of Barbarian, we get another Weapon Mastery. And I want to really hammer in on the Blades of Chaos. They're the most iconic thing that Kratos had before the newer versions of the games. And in order to increase that reach and feel like actual chains whipping out, we're going to grab Weapon Mastery with a whip. That way you have that increased reach, but it also gives you the feature Slow. So when you hit a creature with a whip and deal damage to it, you can reduce its speed by 10 feet. Then also at 4th level of Barbarian, you get an ability score improvement. But we're going to take a feat right away, because we've actually hammered in on 2 of the most important weapons that Kratos has. However, in the newer games, he also has a shield that he uses very well, and it is very important to the playstyle, because he's often parrying his enemies, especially if he has to go up against a Valkyrie or something. So I want to round out all of the items that we need to be able to focus on, and we can do that with the feat Shield Master. This allows us to boost up our strength by 1 point. So here is our starting ability scores. I left dexterity a tiny bit lower because we're really going to focus in on using actual armor, and then we get to throw 1 point into strength, rounding it out. Then, thanks to Shield Master, we get 2 features. First, we get Shield Bash. So if you attack a creature within 5 feet of you as part of your attack action and hit with a melee weapon, you can immediately bash the target with your shield if it's equipped. The target has to succeed on a strength saving throw, and on a failed save, you either push it 5 feet away from you or cause it to have the prone condition. Your choice. This feels very true to the play style of the God of War games. Granted, you can only use this feature once per turn, but that means that if you're using your axe and having your shield in your other hand, you can shield bash. But if you're dual wielding scimitars or whips or whatever, you can still utilize your offhand no matter what. But you definitely want to be knocking creatures prone as much as possible. You can have those absolutely brutal finishers that way, but also in D&D mechanics, when an enemy's prone within melee distance of you, you have advantage on all of your attacks against them. Even though if you're already recklessly attacking, you would get that anyways, but this just means you have another option so you don't have to give enemies advantage against you if you're in a more dire situation. Then the other feature you get from Shield Master is Interposed Shield. If you are subjected to an effect that allows you to make a dexterity saving throw to take only half damage, you can use your reaction to instead take no damage if you succeed on the saving throw, as long as you're still holding a shield. And since you have advantage on dex saves, that's really going to be helpful for making sure you take less damage. Then at 5th level of Barbarian, you get extra attack, so you can attack twice instead of once whenever you take the attack action on your turn, and you get fast movement. so your speed is boosted by 10 feet when you're not wearing heavy armor. Then at 6th level of Barbarian, thanks to having your giant subclass, you get Elemental Cleaver. And there's definitely some more elemental damage types you can deal in the God of War games, even though they're not as crucial as often as some other games, but this allows us to amp that up a bit. So when you enter your rage, you can choose one weapon that you're holding and infuse it with an elemental damage type, either acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. I usually like leaning into thunder just because it feels like I'm hitting with a big booming attack. And while you wield that infused weapon during your rage, the weapon's damage type changes to the chosen damage type, and it deals an extra 1d6 of that damage type as well. But on top of that, it gains the thrown property with a normal range of 20 feet and a long range of 60. And if you throw the weapon, it reappears in your hand an instant after it hits or misses a target. So that means you fully get the feature of either having your weapons attached to you or summoning it back to your hand in the case of the Leviathan axe. But just in case you're in a situation and you chose the wrong damage type or you want to change it up, while raging and holding onto the infused weapon, you can use any bonus action to change the weapon's infused damage type. So you have your ranged attack, you have your basically boomeranging Leviathan axe, and we're pretty well covered on the actual game mechanics. But then at 7th level of being a Barbarian, you get Feral Instinct, so you have advantage on initiative rolls, and at 7th level, you get Instinctive Pounce. So as part of the bonus action you take to enter a rage, you can move up to half your speed. Then at 8th level of Barbarian, you get another ability score improvement, so let's just go ahead and max out that strength. And then at 9th level of Barbarian, you get Brutal Strike. So if you use Reckless Attack, you can forego any advantage on one strength-based attack, and if the attack still hits, the target takes an extra 1d10 of damage, and you can cause one Brutal Strike effect, either using Forceful Blow, so the target's pushed 15 feet straight away from you, and then you can move up to half your speed straight towards the target without provoking opportunity attacks, or you can do Hamstring Blow, so the target's speed is reduced by 15 feet until the start of your next turn. And if you mix that with either Topple or your Shield Bash to knock an enemy prone, both of those are absolutely brutal for battlefield control. You'll just have to see if your Dungeon Master is cool with the possibility of giving up advantage on the reckless attack portion, but if an enemy's already prone, then maybe you can get advantage anyways, but most people don't play it that way, unless you have a really, really nice Dungeon Master. Then at 10th level of Barbarian, you get another Weapon Mastery, so in case you want the Blades of Chaos to be more straight up daggers, you can also just grab Weapon Mastery with daggers. It also gives you the Nick Weapon Mastery property. Then at 10th level of being a giant Barbarian, you get Mighty Impel. So as a bonus action, while raging, you can choose a medium or smaller creature within your reach and move it to an unoccupied space you can see within 30 feet of yourself. An unwilling creature must succeed a strength saving throw, but if at the end of this movement the thrown creature isn't on a surface or liquid, the creature falls, taking damage as normal and landing prone. But this feature also essentially means you can hit a motherfucker with another motherfucker. Then at 11th level of Barbarian, you get Relentless Rage, so you can keep fighting despite going to 0 hit points. So if you drop to 0 hit points while you're raging, you don't die. You can just make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw. And if you succeed, your hit points instead change to a number equal to twice your Barbarian level. Each time you use this feature after the first, the DC increases by 5, but it resets whenever you finish a short or long rest. 12th level of Barbarian gives us another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and throw 2 points into Constitution. Then at 13th level of Barbarian, we get Improved Brutal Strike. So you get 2 new options for your Brutal Strike. You can either use Staggering Blow, so the target has disadvantage on its next saving throw it makes, and it can't make opportunity attacks until the start of your next turn. Or you can do Sundering Blow. So before the start of your next turn, the next attack roll made by another creature against the target gains a bonus +5 to the roll. So in case the boy wants to line up a shot with one of his arrows, it can actually have a little bit of a bonus there. And at 14th level of being a giant Barbarian, you get Demiurgic Colossus. So when you rage, your reach increases by 10 feet. So it really feels like you have full-blown chains attaching to your weapons, like the Blades of Chaos. And your size can increase to large or huge, your choice. But it specifically says it can increase, meaning that it doesn't have to. And also, that Mighty Impel feature to throw enemies around, now you can target large creatures as well. And on top of all of that, the extra damage by your Elemental Cleaver is increased to 2d6. So that means you get to deal your normal weapon damage plus 2d6 plus another 1d10 with Brutal Strike, add in your proficiency bonus twice thanks to activating your Celestial Revelation, and then you just get to decide whether you're attacking just twice or if you're attacking 3 times because you have an offhand attack to do as well. Or you can just bash somebody with your shield instead, giving you a pretty solid amount of damage, and barbarians aren't always known for dealing big damage, despite also being able to add in your rage damage bonus to all this stuff. Then at 15th level of Barbarian, you get Persistent Rage. So when you roll initiative, you can regain all expended uses of rage. After you regain the uses of rage this way, you can't do so until you finish a long rest. But this essentially gives you double the amount of uses of rage. But then on top of that, your rage is so fierce, it now lasts for 10 minutes without you needing to do anything to extend it. You're just constantly pissed off, which feels accurate for Kratos. It only ends early if you fall unconscious or you decide to wear heavy armor, but you're not going to do that. Then at 16th level of Barbarian, you get another ability score improvement. So we're going to boost up our Constitution by 2 more points, maxing it out. 17th level of Barbarian gives us improved Brutal Strike. So now your Brutal Strike damage increases to 2d10, boosting your damage even further than it did before. And you can use 2 different Brutal Strike effects at the same time. Then at 18th level of Barbarian, you get Indomitable Might. So if your total strength check or strength saving throw is less than your strength score, you can now use the score in place of the total. And considering you have a 20 on strength, you're not going to fail most things unless your dungeon master just really wants you to fail, but you can even go further beyond that soon. Then at 19th level of Barbarian, you get to choose an epic boon. And there could be some ways to boost up damage here and there, but frankly, one of the most important things that a barbarian can have is some health, because they're resistant to so much damage that having an insane amount of health is even better. So we're going to take the boon of Fortitude. This increases our max health by 40 points. And whenever you regain hit points, you can regain an additional amount of hit points equal to your Constitution modifier, but you can only do that once per turn. We also get to increase one ability score by 1 point, and usually I wouldn't care much about this, but since you have the ability to swap out a strength save or strength check for your actual strength score, let's go ahead and just throw 1 more point into strength, because we can go beyond 20 points here and bring it to 21. That goes even further at 20th level of Barbarian because you have Primal Champion. So your strength and Constitution score increase by 4 points each, meaning that your strength gets boosted all the way to 25 and your Constitution is 24, giving you a +7 in each of them. So that brings you to 20 levels overall, and your current hit points are 365. But if you were going up against a Tarrasque or however you want to pronounce it, because I know people always give me a hard time for how I pronounce everything, you would actually be able to resist every bit of damage it throws at you, meaning that you effectively have 730 hit points instead of just a measly 365. And that's how I would build Kratos from God of War in Dungeons & Dragons. If you want to compare it to my old version of this build, feel free to check that out. But if you just want to be able to play as this version of him, I have a character sheet available up on Patreon, linked down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here helping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to play as Kratos himself and absolutely decimate gods in your next D&D session.